Good evening. My name is Juanita Senkis. I am the president of CHIP, which is the Coalition of Hispanic Issues in Progress. We would like to welcome everyone here at our annual Candidates Night. Again, to Joe Bach for being so patient and being our crewman over here. We appreciate that so much. And we're going to start with a prayer. Alicia Pardon will open up with a prayer.
God, our Maker, we praise you for the gift of community. Thank you for the communities in which we work and live. Thank you for the community that is your body, the church. Fill us with your spirit today so that as one, we reflect your light and love to each other and to the world. In Christ we pray. Amen.
If we can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, in liberty with justice for all. Thank you. Our first guest for tonight, I would like to welcome Dr. Marsha Ballinger, President of Lorain County Community College, and she will be speaking on issue 17.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here this evening, to have an opportunity to share information about issue 17 for Lorain County Community College. We're very proud that we are Ohio's first community college. Going back to 1963, when the residents of our community came together to ensure that public, affordable, higher education was put within the reach of all Lorain Countyans, it was this community that decided to create that first community college. I'm so very proud that in the past 57 years, we have now impacted 50% of the households in Lorain County. 50% of the households have had someone attend LCCC. I'm also very proud of the fact that last year, we were named the #1 community college in America by the American Association of Community Colleges. Thank you. And that happens because we have a strong community college made possible by the residents of Lorain County. When the community came together to create the community college, they created an initial operating levy. That's what is back on the ballot on March 17th as issue 17. It's the original operating levy that ensured that it would remain affordable and accessible for all Lorain Countyans. It's set to expire this year, and so we are asking voters on March 17th to vote for issue 17. We know that Lorain County Community College continues to be the #1 educational provider and trainer for thousands in our community every single year. As one example, our law enforcement community, our first responders, our nurses, our other allied health and nursing professionals, we are the #1 training and educator. We also look at our high school students. You know, I'm really proud to be standing here at Lorain High School. We partner with all of the high schools throughout Lorain County, but standing here at Lorain High School, so Lorain was one of our founding partners, for example, in our early college high school, and which is, by the way, the highest performing high school in all of Lorain County, and that's for first-generation students. So we're proud of the fact that we created that. We're proud of the fact that our College Credit Plus program, here's a little bit of history, originated here in the city of Lorain. Just this past year, 61% of all 2019 graduates of all Lorain County high schools attend Lorain County Community College just this year. And 43% of the students graduating from Lorain County high schools last year graduated with at least 12 credit hours from LCCC, saving their families over $6.5 million. We partner with 14 universities that bring now over 100 bachelor's and master's degree programs to our campus, assuring not only do we have associate's degrees, certificates, and credentials, but we also have that affordable access to the most in-demand programs at the bachelor's and master's degree. I'm very proud to share with you that just last year, Lorain County Community College became the first community college in the state of Ohio that was given the authority to offer our own bachelor's degree program in an area called, thank you, in an area called microelectromechanical systems, MEMS, sensors, the industrial Internet of Things. We're innovating for the future. Our college is about the future of this county, just as it's been about the future of those hundreds of thousands who, over the past 57 years, have taken classes, have earned credentials, have been enrolled in apprenticeship programs. We are increasing our apprenticeship programs with the trades. I am thrilled and very thankful for the tremendous support that we have had for issue 17. Very, very impressed with all of the groundswell of support throughout the community to ensure that Lorain County Community College continues to provide the level of education that is needed and in demand by our residents. I ask you to please join together with those who are supporting us for issue 17 on March 17th. Thank you, Chip. Chip is one of our endorsers, along with organized labor, along with our county commissioners, along with the Farm Bureau, along with law enforcement. Just this week, we also had many of our city councils, Lorain City Council, Elyria City Council, among others. And if anyone is interested in additional information, they can go to our website, Vote for LCCC. Thank you to Chip. Thank you, Mike Farrar, for organizing this. And thank you for everyone for going out to vote on March 17th.
Thank you, Dr. Ballinger. We're going to continue, and the forum tonight will be moderated by Mike Fidel and Alicia Pardon, both who are trustees of CHIP. In the last couple of years, or more than a few years, we always have the honor to have a student be part of the forum. And this year, again, Lexi did it last year. I'd like to welcome Lexi again, Lexi Thompson, a junior here at Lorain High School, and I believe her plan for the future is to become a nurse. So I'm going to turn it over to the group here. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's CHIP Candidates Forum. The moderators are myself, Lexi Thompson, who is an outstanding junior here at Lorain High and had input in some of the questions that you are going to be asked today that has piqued the curiosity of some of our young people as they watch what's happening in this country today. We also have Miss Alicia Pardon. Alicia is our youngest trustee and also is the co-coordinator of our annual Hispanic Leadership Conference, which this year is celebrating its 25th anniversary. So today we're going to begin with a very important race, which is the representative to Congress from the 9th District. Congresswoman Capter currently holds that seat. She is in Washington, D.C. In this primary, Congresswoman Capter and Mr. Rosewitz are going sort of head-to-head on the Democratic side. And today we have 3 of the 4 Republican opponents who will narrow down to one on March 17th, and then challenge the winner of the Democratic side of the ticket. So we'd like to welcome today Mr. Tim Connors, Mr. Rob Weber, and Mr. Charles Barrett. All three of them are representing the Republican side of the ticket and have agreed to join us today and introduce themselves, answer questions, and sort of share their views with our community. So we're going to begin with opening statements, and you will have 2 minutes to make an opening statement, and we will begin with Mr. Weber.
Hello, my name is Rob Weber, and I'm running for Congress in Ohio's 9th District. I am the best and only viable candidate in the Republican primary in this race. For a little more information about me, please go to robweberforcongress.com. You can find information, biographical information, my platform and policies, and anything else you would like to know. Additionally, you can follow me at my Twitter handle, @WestPointWeber, as well as you can follow us or like us on Facebook, again, Rob Weber for Congress. I would like to talk about a few of my principles that I stand for. I am a loyal supporter of President Trump. I have faith-based conservative values. I'm a staunch defender of the First and Second Amendments. I'm a pro-life advocate, and I believe and support policies that create jobs. 3 words that best describe me is patriot, servant, and leader. Those are all qualities that a good congressman should have. Lastly, I stand for the principle of America first. So once again, robweberforcongress.com. It's easy to remember me. West Point Weber. Vote for me, Rob Weber, on March 17th.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Mr. Barrett, your opening statement, please.
Good day to everyone. My name is Charles Barrett, and I am very much experienced in running for the 9th Congressional District. My experience started in 2014, helping a candidate at that time, and then again in 2016, and here we are again 2020. My experience has been with the Defense Department, working with our veterans, especially with those who are making the transitions between active duty to retired status. And in addition to this, I've also had experience working with NASA, the Lewis Research Center, which is now called Glenn. I am a staunch Republican, a strong conservative, and I believe that God, family, comes first.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Connors, your opening statement.
Hi there. My name is Tim Connors, and I wanted to start by thanking Chip for inviting us all out here today. I also wanted to thank the Lorain High School for hosting this event or allowing us to use this venue, and I wanted to thank Lorain County Community College for filming it. I'm going to tell you a little bit in my opening statement about the main policy position that I'm taking as a candidate for Congress, and the primary reason why I'm in this race. I'm in this race to deal with congressional corruption. It's gotten way out of hand. It's been going on for north of 50 years, and it's gotten pervasive and disturbing. Our Congress has become a ruling class over the rest of us. They serve themselves and not the people that they're meant to serve. They've forgotten who they work for, and I intend to go to Washington and remind them who they work for, who we work for. Really, it surprises me to find out just how much money these congressional representatives make off the backs of your votes. And it's got to stop. We have to change the law and make it so they can't do that anymore. Main position is term limits, trying to prevent career politicians from existing going forward. The second position is the primarily second position is to remove their immunity from insider trading laws so that congressional representatives can no longer use the information that they receive through discharging the duties of their office to make millions and millions of dollars doing something that to every other citizen would be a federal crime. So if elected, I plan to go to Washington and fight on behalf of the citizens of Ohio's 9th District to rein in Washington's corruption and stop wasting all of our money. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Connors. Now we're going to go into our questions phase, and we're going to start with Lexi's question.
Mr. Barrett, as a student, I'm very concerned about school shootings and the safety of our lives. Please share your thoughts on the current national effort by students to impact the laws related to guns in this country.
The issue of school violence has become quite germane and really in some cases quite runaway. The true answer is not only gun education, but also addressing the mental illness that seems to be plaguing our young people today. It is imperative that we have programs in place, intervention, so that these individuals do not feel compelled to reach for a gun to solve the problems. We have not done enough for our young people. They feel isolated, and some then turn to violence. We must give them an opportunity to express their difficulties in life in a far more constructive manner, not turning to guns.
Mr. Connors, same question.
Yeah, the problem with school shootings in our country has gotten a little out of hand. As we can all tell from the news media, there's a much higher frequency of these events occurring in our country right now. I don't believe that fact is related in any way to the number of firearms on our streets or the types of firearms on our streets. I do believe that Mr. Charles was correct. There are mental health issues that affect a lot of these young people that end up shooting up a school. And a lot of them do it after they've already left the school when they're 18, 19, 20 years old. I think that's a manifestation of a cultural issue that's much more deep-seated than just whether or not someone can buy a gun. I think that the social institutions in this country, namely the family, faith, and our education system, have been under assault for a great deal of time. And now we're finally seeing that pay off effectively in the violence that we're seeing today. So when you assault the cultural institutions of the United States of America and you undermine them, you're going to dissuade people. You're going to, can't find the right word, but you're going to make them have a problem. They're going to have an issue adjusting. And when people have a mental health issue and they have an issue adjusting, a lot of times what ends up happening, unfortunately, is they do turn to violence. A lot of times they take guns from their parents or they seek them from their friends. Really, I think what we have to do about guns is nothing. What we have to do is fix our culture. Thank you.
And Mr. Weber, same question.
I believe the first part of your question addressed students and their activism on this issue of gun control and violence, and I am a staunch supporter of First Amendment rights, and that's all First Amendment speech, whether we agree with it or not. So I welcome that, and I encourage students to speak their mind, and anybody in that matter. On the underlying issue, though, of gun violence, I am a strong defender of the Second Amendment. I do believe the underlying issue in this scenario is, in fact, mental illness. I believe, statistically speaking, almost every single mass shooting has an underlying issue of mental illness. The other issue is with the laws that are involved. You see in these cities that have some of the most stringent gun control laws are also some of the most violent cities. Some examples would be Baltimore, Washington, D.C., and Chicago. Also, through my experience on the board of NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, I'm very well aware of the mental health issues that are involved, and I think that is the focus that we need to have and which will prevent the gun violence in our country.
Thank you. And for your second question, starting with you, Mr. Connors, do you believe that the practice of separating families from their children that are caught entering the country illegally is an effective deterrent to illegal immigration? Why or why not?
So I'm going to say yes and no. I do believe that when that policy was enacted, which I believe was under the presidency of Barack Obama and continued well into the presidency of Donald Trump, it doesn't necessarily dissuade people from immigrating. I think the policy is designed to dissuade human traffickers and smugglers from using children as a part of their scheme. So when they apprehend them at the border and they separate the child, not in all instances is that child actually belonging to the person that brought them. It's not always their parent. It's not always a family member. Sometimes that kid is kidnapped. Sometimes they are paid by the parents to smuggle them into the United States. So I do think that at some point, some of those people are actually being helped because they're being separated from their human trafficker. In the other cases, I think it's not okay, right? We shouldn't be locking little kids in cages, but they shouldn't be coming here in the first place in the manner in which they came. So my father was taken from me and my family when I was 9 months old. So when someone else gets their parents taken from them because their parents broke the law, that's kind of how our system works. Now, we can change our system so that it doesn't work like that. But as currently, I don't think it's meant to dissuade immigration, period. I think really it does a damage to the children, but it does help us to fight back against human trafficking. So while I don't think the practice should continue indefinitely, I do believe that Congress does have an obligation to try and remedy the situation in totality. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Weber, I'm going to repeat the question. Do you believe that the practice of separating families from their children when they are caught entering the country illegally is an effective deterrent to illegal immigration? Why or why not?
I don't think that it is being used as a deterrent to illegal immigration. I do believe, again, that there are, in fact, misuse of children coming across the border. I think statistically it'll show that many of these children are actually unaccompanied minors that don't have parents with them, or they are with other people besides family members, and either they're being smuggled in or they're being used as the proverbial shield for coming in. But at the end of the day, I don't think right, wrong, or indifferent, the use of a minor should protect or shield illegal immigration in our country. Our country has not only a right, but it has a duty to ensure that only lawful immigration is allowed in our country, and that appropriate people are screened at the border, that we keep terrorists out, that we keep illegal arms trafficking out, that we keep, stop and prevent human trafficking and sex trafficking that is in fact coming across the Mexican border. So I do believe that that not only is our country's right to pick and choose who we allow to legally immigrate into our country, it is also its duty. Additionally, this flow of illegal immigrants is a slap in the face to all of the legal immigrants who have become citizens in our country for the process that they have properly gone through.
Thank you. Mr. Barrett, the same question.
The United States is a country of laws. And in order for us to maintain our civility, we also must maintain the rule of law. For these individuals who are crossing over the border illegally, they are finding it to be more of a challenge than it would be if they were to follow the rules that we have in place. It is tragic that we have children that are being separated from their families. However, the reason that they're separated is that they're actually being questioned by the ICE officials to ascertain whether or not these individuals, these children, actually belong to those parents, and to find out exactly how they came, where they came from, and who has put them up to it. So many of these children are being protected, in fact, by ICE. Now, in the event that they are, in fact, being separated from their families, I think there are better ways to handle the situation than the way that is currently being portrayed by the media. The rules we have in place are only as good as the ones that we enforce. And it must be clear to many of these individuals who are attempting to cross and, in fact, crossing the border that they will not go ahead of those who have come before them. They must be in line. It is not fair to those who are following the law. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to our third question, and I'm going to start with Mr. Weber. Mr. Weber, suicide prevention and accessible mental health treatment for Lorain County citizens in need are important health goals for Lorain County. Can you share any ideas you might have to address this issue should you be elected to represent us in Congress?
Well, again, I previously stated I'm proud to have served for several years on the board of our Lorain County NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. So I am unfortunately, all too familiar with all the various mental illnesses, depression, and of course, suicide. So I believe that support for that needs to be there. I do believe in government funding for these programs. NAMI is a private organization, meaning non-governmental organization that works hand in hand with county agencies. So I do believe in supporting that. I know we have in the law enforcement, we have the specialty, I don't have the right terminology, but the law enforcement officers that are trained specifically to handle mental illness crises and including suicide prevention. We need to ensure that, I know some of the law enforcement agencies in the county have those programs. We need to provide the funding and ensure that every single law enforcement agency has multiple officers with this training so that wherever there is in the county, at any point in time, if there's that type of crisis, there's a trained professional officer able to respond immediately and help save the lives of our citizens.
Thank you. Mr. Barrett, same question.
The issue of mental illness has become a rather serious issue, needless to say. Our support at a federal level is most important in our schools, providing the necessary programs and the training for our teachers to, number one, to identify the issue, to intervene, and to help those students who are suffering. Also, that help could also be extended to the families. These children are coming oftentimes from very broken homes. And it is our responsibility as good citizens to address these issues. And one way, of course, is to provide the federal funding that is most badly needed. In addition to the school funding for mental illness is the continuation and support for our law enforcement, for those who are not in school, for adults who feel they have no place to turn. Also, our churches, also very good places for support for these individuals who perhaps have no other place to turn. But it is through federal intervention, through our generosity and our tax dollars, that we can prevent many of these tragedies from occurring in our own communities.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Connors, suicide prevention and accessible mental health treatment for Lorain County citizens in need are important health goals for Lorain County. Can you share any ideas you might have to address this issue should you be elected to represent us in Congress?
Yes. So specifically, both of my opponents are correct. This issue needs federal funding. Now, specifically how we would acquire that federal funding, you all may have heard that Congress has been having a lot of conversations about health care and what they plan to do about health care legislation to try to fix the system. I'm of the opinion that if we are going to pass a health care bill or health care legislation in the United States House of Representatives, that it should include coverage for suicide prevention and mental health illness that affect everybody. Just because you don't have a mental illness doesn't mean that you're not affected by it in your family or in your friends or in your community. And so I think it's important for the federal government to step up and do something not just for the residents here in Ohio and in Lorain County, but for everybody in the United States. We all deserve the same quality of life, regardless of where we come from or who we are. And I think it's wrong for us to expect the impoverished or the poor or the underprivileged to be able to seek out the same quality of care and coverage that the wealthy can. And unfortunately, it just can't. So you end up with a lot of situations where someone suffers severely from depression and they can't get help because they can't afford it or they don't have insurance or they don't know what resources to tap, and then they end up committing suicide. We have to prevent those tragedies with federal outreach through programs that we can have put into place through federal healthcare legislation. That's one of the goals that I have when it comes to helping to craft such legislation. And I believe that that's the right thing for us to be doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barrett, how do you think the United States is currently viewed on the world stage? Is this good or bad for the country?
The other countries understand that we need a strong leader here in the United States. And I believe that Donald Trump has done an excellent job of providing that type of leadership. Now, while his message may sometimes be a little unpalatable to those, you also must look more closely at the effects of his policies. How has he helped the United States? And he's helped tremendously. And I think a lot of the countries around the world admire Donald Trump, begrudgingly perhaps, but they certainly do admire Donald Trump and what he's achieved in such a short period of time. I, as a congressman, would absolutely support many, if not all, of his policies. And we, as good citizens, must recognize his hard work and his efforts to improve our lives here. The challenges that we face here in the United States are being addressed directly by Donald Trump, and I would support these as a congressional leader. Issues such as the new trade agreements that are helping us tremendously. We all need to recognize certainly that these are to our benefit and really to our trading partners as well.
Thank you. Mr. Connors, how do you think the United States is currently viewed on the world stage? Is this good or bad for the country?
I think the United States is currently viewed on the world stage in a similar fashion to the way the United States is viewed on the national stage. In that, I think there are two prevailing ideologies. There's two prevailing views of the country that are all around the world. One is that America is powerful, generous, and kind, and that we are the beacon of freedom to the world. And the other view, which has gained a lot more popularity in the last few decades, is that the United States of America represents a sort of robber baron, and that we aggregated the world's wealth to our country in the aftermath of World War II as the only industrialized economy left standing. A lot of other countries feel that we robbed them, that we stole their wealth, but to be honest, after we had success in the aftermath of World War II, look at what's happened on planet Earth. The United States has gone through and established trade relationships that have pulled most of the world out of poverty. We haven't seen anything like this in human history, and it's all because of us. Not just the leadership of our country, but the people in this room who pay taxes that go to fund those particular projects, the military, our State Department, the outreach efforts that we do across the world. And I think that it's a shame that many people in the world have taken the view that we've sort of stolen from them, when really what we've done is given them a roadmap to freedom that they could all try to follow on their own. So I do believe that it's a good thing for the United States of America to be viewed as the beacon of freedom and a kindness, but I think it's a bad thing for the United States to be viewed as some sort of horrible, dictatorial, imperialist power, which is absolutely ridiculous to me. So that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Weber, same question as well.
I think it's the first time that the United States has been respected worldwide in decades. President Trump has put us back in a position of leadership. We are asserting ourselves as a global power, and we are removing ourselves from all of the regions, interregional disputes and fights. For example, in Europe, the times have changed. Our involvement in NATO, while we don't necessarily need to abandon our European allies, we certainly do not need to be involved intimately with their day in, day out affairs. Also, when it comes to trade, China, we have literally built China up from a third world country with our subsidies and favorable trade agreements with them. So now they have become, in fact, a competitive and frankly nearly equal economic power as the United States. The time has changed to level the playing field back to benefit the United States. There is absolutely no reason in the world for us to be subsidizing China's economy anymore. So I do believe the president is gaining respect, and the rest of the world is seeing that the corruption that is blatant across the rest of the world, the way that they do business, the way that our foreign aid has been funneled back into corruption and funneled back into politicians' pockets, our president is putting a stop to that. The United States is a good, clean, ethical country, and if they want to do business with our country and President Donald Trump, the rest of the world is going to have to do it on a very fair, ethical way, and I'm very proud to be part of that.
Excuse me, thank you. That concludes our questions. You will each get 1 minute of closing statements, and Mr. Connors, we'll start with you.
In closing, I just want to say that this is my first time seeking public office. I'm not a politician. I don't do this normally. I don't normally speak to folks. I don't normally talk on camera. I'm just a small business owner from Avon Lake, and I'm tired of seeing what goes on in Washington. I'm tired of seeing what goes on in government. And so I'm actually doing something about it. This is my attempt to try to solve Washington's problem, to try to fix the country that we are all supposed to live together in. And so I'm seeking support, not just from Republicans and not just in the primary, but from Democrats and independents. And I've had Democrats and independents both register as Republicans to vote for me in this primary, as I hope you all will as well. Remember to vote for Tim Connors on March 17th, 2020. Go to timconnors.com. That's where you'll find all of my iterated issues positions, a detailed contact submission form if you want to help out. And if not, that's totally fine. So I'm really just looking for support among all the voters, not just one or the other. And I really appreciate you guys having me out to speak today. And I really appreciate you listening to us talk and asking us really good pointed questions. And thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barrett, your 1 minute.
My message is very simple, really. And that is, it's a matter of inclusion. In order for the Republican Party to win the 9th Congressional District, we need your support from the moderate and conservative Democrats and the independent voters, but especially the moderate and conservative Democrats who may feel they no longer have a party that represents their values. I invite you to join me, Charles Barrett. Join me. We need you. You're important to us. We cannot do this job without you. And furthermore, we won't. The Democrat leadership has become so far left that the policies and the positions they take today no longer represent you, the strong Democrat voter, traditional voter. So I ask for something very simple. No longer support those Democrat leaders with your votes or with your donations. Do it for 2 election cycles, and in this case for the congressional race, that'll be 4 years. And send a very clear message to the Democrat leadership that you will no longer tolerate having your great party being hijacked by the left.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett.
Thank you.
And Mr. Weber, your 1 minute.
God has blessed me with a very unique and diverse background that upon reflection and hindsight has perfectly prepared me for what I'm about to do now, which is serve in a leadership role as a representative for the 9th District. I have a background starting with West Point and an engineering degree there. I have a business degree with business experience, and then culminating in, I came back home to the great state of Ohio and went to the Ohio State University College of Law. I picked a form of law practice of trial law, helping regular individual citizens in their times of need, solving their everyday problems. I feel that that has truly prepared me for what we are doing here, helping and serving other people. In short, my entire lifetime has been about service to others. Go to robweberforcongress.com. Remember me as West Point Weber. Please vote for me, Rob Weber, on March 17th. God bless everyone.
Thank you. We will take a short break as we transition to the next race.
We make Marines who overpower the desire to quit with the perseverance to prevail. Not for glory, but for honor. For a code that isn't written or spoken, but lived. It's what we do. It's who we are. It's the battle cry of our fighting spirit. Battles won. See all the battles Marines fight to win at marines.com.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We have been asking questions of the representatives for Congress for the 9th District. We have with us today, from the Democratic side, Mr. Pete Rosewitz, who is the individual running against Marcy Kaptur in the primary election on March 17th. Welcome, Mr. Rosewitz. We're going to begin with an opening statement. You have 2 minutes to introduce yourself and utilize the time the way you see fit.
Well, first of all, thank you, everybody, for coming out. Sorry that I was a little late. I actually live in Lakewood, so it's, you know, a great district. It's only about half an hour, 40 minutes to the middle of it. But, so I've never run for anything political office-wise, which is the reason that I'm doing this. The only three requirements are being 25, being a citizen for 8 years, and living in the state for 1. And I've lived in Ohio for all 32 years. I grew up in North Royalton, went to St. Albert the Great from kindergarten to 8th grade, went to Ignatius for a little bit, St. Ignatius, and then graduated from the University of Akron in 2010. I moved back up to Lakewood right after that, worked at Quicken Loans for 3 years, set a record. I wrote 101 loans in a month. Got out of that, helped open a restaurant on 41st and Lorain called The Plum, and now sous chef, salesman. I play a bunch of instruments as well. It's time to add Congress to my annoying resume. But basically the whole reason that I'm doing this is to show people that you don't have to raise $1.5 million, $2 million in order to give somebody a general race for a primary election. The government isn't there to just take things and decide what we need to do and what laws we should follow. We give them what they should be supporting us with. And I think that's been kind of lost over the last couple of years. And hopefully, I'll be the one to be able to show people that beating an incumbent who has had her seat 4 years longer than I've been alive, and business as usual isn't just the way to do things. We can use something new. Thank you.
Mr. Rosewitz, as a student, I'm very concerned about school shootings and the safety of our lives. Please share your thoughts on the current national effort by students to impact the laws related to guns in this country.
Yeah, great question. So when I was running a taco place in Lakewood called Taco Tano's, one of our servers organized a walkout of Lakewood High School. They went to Washington, D.C. to protest, and I think that that is amazing. Everyone, especially children, if you see something that is inherently just really evil, such as a school shooting almost every day of the year, more people should be getting out of their jobs and out of their houses and going to the streets, because this is awful. Every country has mental illness. Every country has video games. It's not that. There's something different. There's a real root cause. My two things with it is we could adopt something like I believe 16 other states have, where there's actual gun licensing. You don't just like buy a gun and you're good. You have to have a license. It takes more than an hour to be able to get a gun. It takes a couple weeks. Or we roll with what Chris Rock said in like 2002, and you guys can have all the guns that we want, but bullets cost $4,000 a piece. And hopefully we'll be able to cut down on it. But obviously the licensing one's a little better.
Thank you. And for your second question, do you believe that the practice of separating families from their children when they're caught entering the country illegally is an effective deterrent to illegal immigration? Why or why not?
Oh man, no, not at all. I can't imagine something that would anger me towards a country or a nation or a bureaucracy more than being starving and hungry and thirsty and willing to walk God knows how many miles through a war-torn country just for the off chance that my children may have a better life. I know my parents would do the same and more for me. I would do the same for my 6-year-old nephew, and I'm assuming just about everybody in here would be more than willing to do more than that, just for a chance, just a minute possibility. No matter what cage you have to be put in, you're never gonna see your children again. They get separated, they get lost. I know, I'm guessing a lot of people would do that. I would, and I think that it's not the right way to do it. There is no line to get in this country. To get in here from Mexico, the average is like 7 to 9 years to be able to do it legally. If I was starving, if I was hungry, if I was worried about violence towards myself, my family, I would be crawling through whatever it took to get into this country. And I think that as the greatest nation on this planet with the most wealth, especially with the amount of land we have, we can find room for these disaffected people that are just getting shoved through a system that clearly doesn't work.
Thank you. Next question. Suicide prevention and accessible mental health treatment for Lorain County citizens in need are important goals for our county. Can you share any ideas you might have to address this issue should you be elected to represent us in Congress?
Hitting with 3 great questions. So I have a bunch of ideas and opinions, but those are my ideas and opinions. I like to regurgitate what way smarter people have been saying for a long time. I think that we should have 100% free universal health care. Every other country in the world that's industrialized, that has way smaller of a GDP, way smaller military budget, if they can do it and they save a lot of money and they have a way smaller amount of gun violence, suicides, then we should probably take note of a different country because there's an insane amount of examples out there. I think that just like being able to get clean water and hopefully breathe clean air, if somebody has an issue that's affecting them, an ailment, whatever it may be, they shouldn't be afraid of going bankrupt to go to the hospital. They shouldn't be trying to get an Uber instead of calling an ambulance when they're giving birth. Because it's just really crazy to me, and I'm sorry to get emotional about it. I can't imagine that in a country with the amount of billionaires that we have, that they are okay with this happening to a lot of their employees that they're barely paying a living wage to in the first place. So universal health care is really important and one of the biggest things that I'm focused on right behind campaign finance reform. So yes, hopefully people have someone to talk to and this world to be a little bit of a better place.
Thank you. Your last question is, how do you think the United States is currently viewed on the world stage? Is this good or bad for the country?
Sorry, bad timing. So, again, opinions, they're important and everyone's allowed to have one. But if you look at Gallup polls that are done internationally, we aren't looked at as saviors, beacons of peace and democracy. We are usually the #1 answer of who people think is the biggest threat to the planet. And that's real. That's not me being like, oh, the government, whatever. That's real. That's actual data. That's talking to people in every other country in the world. And I think that that is really bad. I don't like when my friends are mad at me for a minute. I can't imagine that entire countries, a majority of the world not liking us is a good thing. And I think that there are definite reasons for it. And I don't have like 45 years to discuss all of them right now. But we need to start talking about those reasons. We need to be honest with ourselves. We can't just go, yes, America's great. And someone says, why? And we go, well, because America's great. We are great. I love this country. I love the people, the diversity of the ability to just walk into a restaurant and hang out with a lot of different people in a lot of different socioeconomic circles. Because that's how you learn stuff, is by hanging out with people you don't know, that know things that you don't. And the first thing well, I'm not going to tell you guys what I think we should learn, but shucks, being honest with ourselves is really important. And I hope that we could all take a look at what's going on in our country and not point fingers, but just own it. Thank you.
Thank you. You will have 1 minute for closing remarks.
Shucks. Well, thank you all for listening to me ramble for a few minutes. Sorry if it was a little more wordy than necessary. I'm pretty gosh darn nervous. I've never done this before. The last time I was remotely related in anything political, I got arrested in 2015 for protesting the Michael Brelow verdict. The police officer that got let go when there was like 128 bullets fired into a car. And I wasn't planning on going there, I was at work, and I got stuck in jail for 2 days. So this is the next thing that I'm trying to do, because I notice when things are going on in front of me when they're bad, and I annoyingly get up and act right away. But it's time for us to not, with having something shoved in our faces, be able to look around and realize that homeless children that are in our backyards is a real thing. The numbers are 1 in 10 students in major urban areas. Kids in America. Most of the homeless people in this country are veterans. So if we're supporting our troops, we need to support them back home as well. And we need to bring them home because we're imposing things on countries that don't really want it. And I guess, sorry again for rambling, but thank you guys so much, and have a great day.
Thank you very much. We'll take a short break as we transition into the next race.
Ohio State is saving lives every day.
This is Ohio State.
We're the economic engine of the state, a major employer.
Over 60,000 students. We're on the forefront of cancer research. An educational core of Ohio.
Impacting tens of thousands daily. Our alumni organization is nearly 500,000 worldwide.
This is Ohio State.
This is Ohio State.
Ohio State. This is the Ohio State University.
Good evening. We'd like to welcome you both to the CHIP Candidates Forum, and this is the Lorain County Commissioners race. You will both have 1 minute of opening statements, and Mr. Phillips, we will start with you.
My name is Gerald W. Phillips. I'd like to thank CHIP for hosting this facility. I've been a long-term resident in Avon Lake for 36 years. I'm married 46 years, 4 children, 2 grandchildren, member of Holy Spirit Parish. I'm a certified public accountant for 43 years. I'm an attorney for 42 years. I'm also an activist. I've been involved with a group called Ohio Citizens for Honesty, Integrity, and Openness in Government. It promotes the democratic process through public records, open meetings, the petition process, and ballot initiative. I've worked with numerous community groups, numerous citizens groups. I work with Dennis Flores with the water sewer issue in Lorain. I have literature out front that gives you more information as far as my background, my experience, what I stand for. I hope that you pick up that. Since I only have 2 minutes, you know, I can't say everything in 2 minutes. I have read the CAFRA, which is the Certified Annual Financial Report for the county for 2018. It's approximately a 250-page document. And because of my experience as a CPA and an attorney, I believe I am well qualified to understand the complexity of county government. The priorities in my life are faith, family, my constituents, and I'm an American first, and I'm not a D or an R. I represent the American people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. I'd like to make a correction. The opening statement is for 2 minutes. He did receive his 2 minutes, and Ms. Hung, you will also have 2 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you, members of the panel. Thank you to the audience for attending tonight, and thank you to the CHIP organization for having us here tonight. My name is Michelle Hung. I am married to Jeff Hung for 15 years. He is a national sales manager for Sherwin-Williams Roofing Solutions. We have 1 daughter. She's 11. I was raised in North Olmsted. My husband is from Westlake, and his parents own the Asian Walk in Westlake. So that's where the Hung name comes from. My experience comes from an automotive background. I started in sales and worked as a finance manager and was an inventory manager for 12 years before I put my career on hold to start my family. One of my duties was to track the money on every car, and some people don't know. From the time a car is ordered, there are dollars attached to every vehicle. The first month I started as inventory manager at Motor Cars Honda, I found and recovered $32,000 in unclaimed funds, reported directly to the owner and controller of the dealership. I work with the bank who owns the cars, and I work with Honda ordering and accepting extra inventory. I worked with a roughly $12 million rolling monthly inventory budget, and my skill set makes for a great asset at the city and county level. Just a little bit about me. I'm a fiscal conservative. I support the Second Amendment, free speech, quality education with local control. I'm pro-life and support President Trump, and got my start here on the county in the primary campaign for President Trump. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hung. In 2016, 8 people died every day in Ohio due to accidental overdose from heroin, other drugs, and prescription medication. In 2017, the number rose to 14 per day. If elected to office, what steps would you take to reduce overdose deaths and curb this epidemic within Lorain County?
Yes, ma'am. You know, everyone is impacted by this. You know, the families that are going through this. Our departments, our sheriff's department, the judges, you know, I will be a budgetary authority to make sure that we are fiscally sound and our resources are being used wisely, and we're working together with the lawmakers, you know, whether it be state representatives or Congress or judges, with the programs that they want to implement. I, as a county commissioner, can't just implement a program, but I have to be able to work with these people, so when they want to implement a program, we can work together and we can get it done, and we would have the resources to fund it. So it's not just an I, it's a we, and it's a team effort.
Thank you. Mr. Phillips, if elected to office, what steps would you take to reduce overdose deaths and curb this epidemic within Lorain County?
Well, I think you first have to understand why we have this problem. We have drug companies who are marketing drugs for profit and the profit motive. Also, we have the problems with unethical doctors who are overprescribing. So we need to address that. And unfortunately, as county commissioner, I don't have much to do with that. I have to deal with the end results. I think we need to stop the revolving door with drug offenders, rehabilitate them first so they don't stay in the system. We need to emphasize the drug court and the veterans court, because many of the people, you know, veterans end up with drug addiction problems. So we need better education, and we need to help the local police deal with it.
Okay, for your next question, Lorain has actually been listed on some websites as a sanctuary city. For those at home who may not know, a sanctuary city is one where undocumented immigrants are not prosecuted for the sole reason of being here illegally. Please tell us your position on sanctuary city, and I'd like to begin with Mr. Phillips.
This is a complex issue at the national level that deals with immigration, and the federal government has control over it. I don't necessarily agree. You know, I'm somewhere in the middle. We're all immigrants in this country, and my policy is not necessarily the so-called Republican position. I would have those 11 million immigrants register, and if they don't register, so we know where they are, and if they found out not, then we send them out. But we would also let those 11 million illegal immigrants, if they're not a convicted felon, they're hardworking, they pay their taxes, they work, they should stay in this country. And at some point, and I know this is not a Trump philosophy, but I wouldn't have no problems in letting them obtain citizenship. If they're hardworking Americans, then we should welcome them. The sanctuary city is a complex issue. I don't think local cities should use their forces to enforce the federal law. And I think each city needs to look at whether or not they have more issues to deal with. Lorain has a lot of crime. I think that they should devote their resources to that crime. Let the federal government enforce the federal immigration. They should stay out of the cities, and if they want to enforce it, let them do it.
Thank you. Ms. Hung, your position on sanctuary cities?
Yes, thank you, Michael. First, I'd like to say that the United States is the greatest country in the world. People want to come here. My grandmother came here from Czechoslovakia in the 40s, was getting on the boat, and a Nazi soldier looked at her and said, "You're next." This literally saved her life to come here. My husband's father came here in his 20s. He was a boating fisherman and immigrated here legally. It's important for people to come here legally. We're a nation of laws, and especially here in Lorain County, we need to stand up for the people that came here legally. My goal would be to support those individuals and help them succeed before we go out and help those who came here illegally. I think we can't do one without doing the other. So it improves the lives of U.S. citizens, and once we do that first, then we can stop and take a look and assess those that are here illegally and what we can do to help them.
Thank you. And for your third question, starting with you, Mrs. Hung. Lorain County's transportation services still fall short of meeting the needs of Lorain County citizens. If elected, what will you do to improve a situation that disproportionately affects the working poor of our community?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. The first thing I would do is I would stop doing the same thing that has failed for the past 20 years. We're asking people to fund something that they will never see. There are people that will never see the bus in their areas where they live to pay for it. So I believe the solution is to create a partnership with the communities that want and need transit. And this is going to require leaders, and us, we need to stand up and lead and come up with revenue to pay for routes in their community and have the county kind of cover the connecting routes and routes and be the the glue on that. This allows others to see a successful program that they can then, it'll encourage other cities to join in on it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Phillips, the same question.
I've attended a number of commissioners' meetings over the number of years, and there's one resident who comes to the meetings every so often. She just came recently complaining about the bus situation and the lack of it for somebody in her situation. And, I listened to her. I don't think we need a mass transit system at a huge government cost and regulations, but we as a county need to help people who need transportation to work, who need transportation for medical reasons, and we can find out who those people are, and we should provide the services for them. We have a veterans bus that serves the veterans. We can contract it out to private contractors on a case-by-case basis. We can do a very cost-effective system to help those people, who need transportation to go to medical appointments, to go to work, and other situations. Seniors, retirees, people on fixed income. We need to be a compassionate county and deal with it. But at the same time, not make a big bureaucratic situation where we have costs and an inefficient system. So if I'm elected commissioner, I intend to use my experience as a CPA to provide an effective, efficient transportation mechanism for those who need it. Thank you.
Thank you. That concluded the last question. You will both get 1 minute of closing remarks. Mr. Phillips, we'll start with you.
I believe I'm the best candidate to represent the Republican Party in November. I believe I'm most qualified, experienced to oversee the complexity of county government, the financial, legal, social issues. I got 43 years of practical accounting experience as a CPA, 42 years as practical legal experiences as an attorney. My conservative fiscal philosophy is needed to oversee the multi-million-dollar funds and assets of the county. My over 30 years of experience as an activist representing citizens groups throughout Lorain County makes me a voice of the people. I have the best chance to win in November. 5, I'm an advocate for county government reform, for the townships, for veterans, and for citizens' rights. And on March 17th, vote for Phillips for commissioner. And this is also to independents and also to Democrats. I need your support in order to be on the ballot in November. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. And Mrs. Hung, your 1 minute.
Thank you. I've been on city council. I'm now in my 3rd year of a 4-year term, and I can work with other elected officials to drive results. I can make sure, regardless of party, the constituents are represented by the Board of Commissioners. We're in a time where things are looking up for people. They're feeling like the economy is going well in spite of the Democrat monopoly on our county government. While precious time and money has been wasted with this impeachment business, the president has been busy with job-creating initiatives, raising wages, enacting fair trade deals, and lifting up the citizens of every race and religion. From rural areas to the cities, we are seeing growth and expansion. I would be a commissioner that works with you. Instead of saying this is how we're doing it, I would say let's work together and let's find a solution. We have a unique time right now for our county to have our own economic boom. Leaders lead, and we can make that change right now, but we need to be committed. You know, some folks ticking off that Republican box, it's not something they usually do. But also, the Republican Party and the Democrat Party aren't the same party that they were 30 years ago. So I say, what do you have to lose?
Thank you. And go ahead. That will conclude this race. We'll take a small break as we transition into the next.
Every year, the Salvation Army serves nearly 30 million people in need. That's one person every second. So by the time you've finished watching this, 30 more lives will have been changed for good. All thanks to your donations.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We have come to our final race of the evening. It is a very important race for Lorain County. It is the race for the position of Lorain County Prosecutor. We have with us today the Lorain County Prosecutor incumbent, Mr. Dennis Will, and the challenger, a lawyer, a gentleman from our community, Mr. Tomlinson, J.D. Tomlinson. So we're going to begin with opening statements, and we'd like to begin with Mr. Tomlinson. You have 2 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, Chips. Thank you. Everybody, thanks for being engaged in the community. It's nice to see everybody out here. Ladies and gentlemen, Prosecutor Will, experience matters. It matters even more, though, when it produces results. We are currently living in one of the worst drug trafficking counties in the nation. Not in the state, but in the nation. Up to 30,000 Lorain County residents are misusing or abusing opioids, accounting for well over 100 deaths per year. Our children are suffering. The vast majority of our foster care placements are due to parental drug abuse. The cost of this crisis is immense to Lorain County citizens, which is nearly $200 million a year in negative economic impact. Significant. I think we can do better. In fact, I know we can. And so do the organizations which have endorsed me. They include the Lorain County AFL-CIO Federation of Labor, representing 42 labor organizations. And most telling, I have been unanimously endorsed by the 4 largest safety force unions in the county. Those include the Lorain Professional Firefighters, Local 267, the Lorain Fraternal Order of Police, Lodge Number 3, the Elyria Firefighters, Local 474, and just recently the Elyria Police Patrolmen's Association. These are the men and the women on the ground who enforce our laws daily, and I have their confidence. They believe firmly that the residents of Lorain County are safe with me. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Will, your opening statement, 2 minutes, please.
Thank you. Welcome to everyone. Thank you for taking some of your time to come here and share this with us tonight and listen to our views. My name is Dennis Will. I am your elected Lorain County Prosecutor. I have occupied that position. It's been my honor to be there for 15 years. Prior to that, I grew up in Elyria. I was one of 11 children. My dad was a union machinist. I graduated from Elyria Catholic High School in 1970 when I was 17, and 2 weeks later I joined the Marine Corps. I served 4 years in the Marine Corps. When I got out, I worked at U.S. Steel, and I was hired by the city of Elyria in 1977 to be a police officer. I worked as a police officer for almost 26 years. I rose in rank to the rank of captain. I commanded every unit on the police department in one respect or another. I started the first community policing unit in Elyria, the neighborhood impact unit, which is still in effect. And I learned different things about what you have to do for policing in order to serve your community. While I was a policeman, I put myself through law school using the GI Bill and was able to graduate after going to Lorain Community College, Heidelberg, and Cleveland Marshall College of Law, graduate and get my certificate to practice law in the state of Ohio. I was an assistant Lorain County prosecutor for 11 years, practicing in the courtroom, running the grand jury, and supervising individuals. And then I was elected your county prosecutor and have been there for the last 15 years. We face a plethora of problems here in Lorain County, as we do throughout the state of Ohio. I have been a member of the Ohio Prosecuting Attorneys Association and on their executive board and their legislative committee for 15 years, and I'm well aware of what goes on in the state and what problems we have to deal with. And I have served my entire life to do nothing more than to protect the citizens of Lorain County, and I will continue to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Will, what is your position on the death penalty? If re-elected to the position of county prosecutor, under what conditions would you seek the death penalty?
The death penalty is still law in the state of Ohio, although there's been much talk about rescinding it. I don't see that there's political will in Columbus to even address that problem. However, in the state of Ohio, if you want to consider the death penalty, you have to understand the statutory guidelines. Statutory guidelines require that first you have an aggravated murder, and then there have to be aggravating circumstances which would qualify it as a consideration for the death penalty. Right now, the way we deal this is we pre-staff cases when they come in to view the evidence that's available, determine if there's evidence of all the different elements that are required under the statute, and if they are necessary and they meet the requirements, then we would submit them to the grand jury, and we would have the grand jury make a determination on whether or not it was warranted to have a specification for the death penalty on any aggravated murder charge.
Thank you. Mr. Tomlinson, what is your position on the death penalty if elected to the position of county prosecutor? Under what conditions would you seek the death penalty?
Well, listen, it's a heavy subject. It's one that occupies my mind often. I spend many sleepless nights wondering about that question. There is no case that represents the death penalty case. Like Attorney Will mentioned, there's a process to go through. Listen, it's expensive. It's expensive. It's rarely utilized. People aren't being put to death. But you hope that the individuals in this county elect an individual that makes the right choice and chooses the right case to go after it. I think that maybe one of the interesting cases that may force me to kind of use that issue or use that statute would be maybe attacking a police officer in the line of duty. Not that I believe police officers' lives mean any more than the next individual, but I do believe it represents an attack on the system. But like I said, it's a very weighty issue, and it's something that I struggle with. But it is the law of the land, and I would be prepared to use it under the correct circumstances.
Thank you. For your second question, starting with you, Mr. Tomlinson, how should seized drug money be utilized by the Lorain County Prosecutor's Office?
Well, I think seized money should be used, first of all, to go and apprehend dangerous people. That's one of the primary reasons for it, but I'm really interested in crime prevention and treatment as well. Every day I represent clients that struggle with the drug issues, and when you see one that gets through it, it's kind of, it's a beautiful thing to see, but that money should be used to apprehend people and to maybe try to be preventative with crime. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Will. The same question. How should seized drug money be utilized by the Lorain County Prosecutor's Office?
You first have to understand that there's statutory provisions which control how that money can be utilized. Out of the first $100,000 that's recovered, 10% of it has to go to some type of community outreach and or education. And if you go over that amount, then there's 20% needs to come out and go to it. So that's mandatory, that's required by the statute, and that's what we do with the money that we presently have come into our office. Secondly, that money can be utilized to meet matching funds to be able to operate your office. And for those of you that remember when we had the financial meltdown, they cut our budget 20% in the prosecutor's office. And one of the things I was able to keep the office working and keep people employed was because I was able to utilize those as matching funds, and I bootstrapped it with the Sheriff's Department, so we kept people working when there was no money, there were no tax dollars, and we were able to continue prosecuting people and protecting the public. Finally, one of the things that I've seen recently is the school system has just a plethora of problems that involve children not being able to be taken care of so that they can go to school and that they can be successful. And so we've made several different efforts through our outreach program to find ways to plug those holes and to help the students.
Thank you. One of the reasons for mass incarceration in major U.S. cities is the length of sentences that have been meted out over the past several decades. New York, for example, has over 10,000 people currently serving life sentences. What is your position on sentencing reforms to eliminate mandatory minimums, reduce maximums, and eliminate enhanced sentencing mechanisms? We will begin with Prosecutor Will.
This is a problem that's been going on since the early 1990s when the previous drug epidemic, the cocaine epidemic, hit the shores here of Lorain County, and it spread throughout Ohio. They revised the Ohio Revised Code in 1995. They got rid of indefinite sentences and went to definite sentences in truth in sentencing. That proved to not be the solution that they hoped it would be. The number of people incarcerated in Ohio went from 7,000 back in the mid-1970s to over 50,000, and now is just shortly 48,000 some odd people there. So they have come up with several different mechanisms to try to deal with this. None of them have been successful thus far. What is my position? I believe in anything that's more efficient and effective in dealing with this. You know, I don't want to pay you taxes any more than anybody else. I want to make sure we spend our dollars efficiently. But you have to come up with some type of a system that's going to be effective to protect the public, and it's going to be efficient. And right now, they're working in Columbus constantly to come up with different efforts to do this. There was justice reinvestment, which was about 5 years ago. Then there was the most recent sentencing reforms that went through the Sentencing Commission. And then there was the Ohio Supreme Court asking different types of considerations to be made. So I think it's something that's ongoing right now. I have no problem as long as it's something that continues to protect the public, and it's something that can utilize our funds effectively.
Thank you. Mr. Tomlinson, your position on sentencing reforms to eliminate mandatory minimums, reduce maximums, and eliminate enhanced sentencing mechanisms.
Yeah, well, obviously that's an issue that would be involved with the legislator with regards to sentencing. However, I do believe minimum mandatory do kind of hamstring judges. You know, in my experience handling criminal cases, you know, every case is a little different. Even though two cases can be involved in similar conduct, they can involve different perpetrators, different victims, and the situations can be so substantially different that it's difficult to give one kind of penalty for all of them. So what I would favor is not hamstringing judges so that there is mandatory, so they have maybe a little bit more discretion. Like Prosecutor Will said, this is a very difficult and complicated issue. I think that resources do need to be, mass incarceration is a problem, like we talked about with the early cocaine problem. There was even different sentences for which type of cocaine you used or possessed. That led a lot, especially disproportionately affected the minority communities and sent a lot of people away for a long time for crimes that were nonviolent. So like I said, I think that, creating minimum mandatories does hamstring a judge and does hamstring the system a little bit, so I would be open to reform.
Thank you. I have said this before that in 2016, 8 people died every day in Ohio due to accidental overdose from heroin, other drugs, and prescription medications. In 2017, that number rose to 14 per day. My question to you, Mr. Tomlinson, do you support prosecution over treatment when it comes to drug users cases coming into your office? Please explain your answer.
Well, it depends on what case is coming into the office. Drug users, no, I don't. I don't think it helps the situation at all. I think that people that sell drugs, especially opioids, that is a major problem, and those are definitely the ones that we should target. Like I said, being involved, you know, the nice thing about doing criminal defense work is that you're at the ground level. And so not only do I see clients that struggle with the issue, I know these treatment centers, I know those who run them, I know judges, I know the prosecutors involved in the system. And when you see like the drug court that's being operated in the common pleas court, every now and then I have a pretrial set on the same day, and I'll get to go in there right before they release the individuals to go on their day. And you see the love and compassion that Judge John Maraldi shows to these individuals. And when you see them pass through the system and how proud they are and how proud their families are who suffered through their whole addiction, it's a beautiful thing. So I really would like to focus on treatment, and especially seeing it at the level in which I've been able to see it.
Thank you. Mr. Will, do you support prosecution over treatment when it comes to drug user cases coming into your office?
This is another issue that's before the state legislature right now. There's two pending bills, Senate Bill 3, House Bill 1. They are both reflections of issue 1 that was voted down about 2 years ago. The issue is that they want to treat this as a public health crisis as opposed to a criminal justice problem. And my answer to that is, again, I have no problem as long as you can come up with a system that's both effective and efficient and spends your tax dollars and solves the problem in an efficient manner. However, if you know anything about drug addiction, okay, the recidivism rate is approximately 90%. So this is not a one-time, one and done where you send somebody in and you send them to drug court. There's no guarantee that's going to solve the problems. So you have to come up with a system that's going to have enough resources, and that's going to be expensive. And right now, I think in Columbus, what they're playing with is how they can figure out how much money they can put into this process, yet still be more cost-effective than sending someone to prison. They've been trying to reduce the level of individuals incarcerated in our prison for as long as I can remember, okay? It keeps going up. And the problem is going to be whether or not they can bring enough funding and enough resources to this to treat it as a public health crisis. If they can, then I think the individuals that are addicted can be treated that way. I do not favor treating the people that sell these drugs in that manner. They're part of the problem. They should be treated as such. So it's going to be another issue where you're going to have the legislature make some policy determinations that are going to affect everybody in this room and everybody in Lorain County.
Thank you. And for your next question, starting with you, Mr. Will. In countless trials, the accused is unable to exercise their constitutional right to testify on their own behalf because the prosecutor will cross-examine them about unrelated prior arrests or convictions. As Lorain County prosecutor, would you commit to limiting cross-examination of the accused to just facts and circumstances surrounding the charges on trial? Why or why not?
My short answer, no. Why not? Because you cannot question defendants simply on prior arrest or prior inconsistent conduct. There's a specific evidence rule that deals with that. Secondly, if you're going to utilize prior convictions, again, there are certain limitations on what convictions can be used and whether or not the crime was something of crimen falsi that has to do with their credibility. So that's built into the system. And the same is true of any other witness. Any other witness that's brought before that court can be questioned by whatever counsel is questioning him on the same issues, whether or not they affect credibility. I do not believe that that impacts the people's ability to be able to take the stand and testify on their own behalf. I believe that if they have any issues that deal with that, then they have a legitimate legal counsel that can address that. Secondly, there's rules in place, and they've been in place for a long time. This is part of our system. And so I think that that's dealt with in a reasonable manner, and the judge is not going to let you ride roughshod over an individual if it's not something that's pertinent and can be properly asked.
Thank you. Mr. Tomlinson, the same question?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, this is an issue that as defense counsel I face every day. I absolutely agree with the prosecutor Will on this matter. The answer is no. Listen, a defendant has the right to choose whether he takes the stand or not. And the idea that his prior convictions have no relevancy, I find to be a bit ridiculous. I don't know that someone should be rewarded for having a record as long as their arm. And as Prosecutor Will said, there are rules of evidence that are in place for this. We can't make those determinations. Those have already been made for us. So I agree with Prosecutor Will with that regard. I think it's absolutely relevant to whether their credibility, quite frankly. But like as defense counsel, what I typically do is I don't wait for the state of Ohio to cross-examine. I usually bring that out in the direct testimony so I don't have to worry about kind of looking as if I'm hiding something. So the way I kind of operate with those, with my cases, is if I'm going to put a defendant on the stand and I know he has a record, I'm absolutely going to bring that out first. But no, that's absolutely relevant evidence.
Thank you both for your insights. Final question. We're going to begin with Mr. Tomlinson. Chief judges in several major cities have stated that a prosecutor wields so much influence on grand juries that they can actually get them to indict a ham sandwich. They recommend replacing the grand jury in all cases with preliminary hearings where witness testimony or witness testify under oath and subject to cross-examination. What is your position on this issue? And we'll begin with Mr. Tomlinson.
Yes, it's a time-consuming notion, the idea of having preliminary hearings instead of grand juries. I don't particularly favor it. Typically, cases can be pretty factually simple. There can be whether the drugs were in the possession of the individual or not, for example. And preliminary hearings, I've handled many of them in my career. They can be very long, and they can be very time-consuming, especially, and it means less when the facts are kind of clear. Now, with regards to grand juries in general, the nice part about having them be private is that sometimes the grand juries convene and the individual is cleared. And so if it was an open process and they would have to be subject to the allegation without any kind of true bill of indictment being issued, then that would be detrimental to their reputation. Now, the question of whether or not defendants post-indictment, after there's been a true bill of indictment's been issued, on whether they should have access to grand jury information, that's a much more interesting question. I do see a very strong argument that they could maybe potentially have access to that information just because it could contain inconsistent statements that could aid in their defense. But that's a much more interesting question to me on whether they have access to the information post-indictment.
Thank you. Mr. Will, your position on replacing the grand jury in all cases with preliminary hearings where witnesses testify under oath and subject to cross-examination.
This was another issue that came up about 3 years ago. Chief Justice O'Connor put together a committee to research either changing or recodifying how the grand jury operates. I ran the grand jury for about 7 years as an assistant county prosecutor, and one of the things I found out is that the grand jury is a lot more effective than people believe. And yeah, there's the old saying that you could get them to indict a ham sandwich, but the problem is then somebody's got to try the ham sandwich. And this is where knowing what evidence you need to seek, what evidence you need to verify, and what evidence is indicative of the person's guilt that you should put before a grand jury so they can reasonably use their common sense, and they do use their common sense, to be able to determine whether or not an indictment should be returned. Now, some states, California, for those of you who remember, they have both a grand jury and a process where you can take it before a preliminary hearing. If that's something that the legislature feels they want to do, it is going to be time-consuming. It's going to be more costly. Whether or not it's more effective, I would have to wait and see. Based upon my experience, I would not believe that to be true. And it's a matter of who's operating the grand jury. We regularly, when I was an assistant, would bring in defendants if they wanted to testify before the grand jury. You could not force them to do so, but we gave them the opportunity to come in and tell their side of the story. And I can tell you in many instances when the grand jury heard all of the evidence, they made a determination, and usually common sense bore itself out. So I would say this is something that's already been looked at. There hasn't been no change in Columbus, and where we end up at, I think, is a matter of the other things that are taking place in Columbus to see where they shovel the ball to.
Thank you, and thank you both for the wealth of knowledge that you've brought to us today. That concludes our questions. We're now going to have our final closing statements, and we're going to begin with a 2-minute statement from Mr. Will.
This is not something that I chose to do simply as a matter of being elected to public office. In 1977, I went into a career in law enforcement. I moved that career from law enforcement to prosecution. It's what I've done all of my adult life. And the reason I do it is because I believe that it's imperative that this office is the most important office to bring safety to the citizens of Lorain County on any number of aspects. It also has to do with all of the ancillary things that we do in the prosecutor's office: children's services, support, child support, juvenile adjudications, and civil litigation. So everything we do is something that benefits and protects the citizens of Lorain County, and I've spent my entire adult life learning how to do that and perfecting my skills. Why do I think I'm qualified? And I ask for your vote on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, because we have a number of problems coming down the road. We have a number of issues that are going to be coming out of Columbus. I follow them religiously because I'm on the executive committee and the legislative committee of the OPAA, and I can tell you that we're going to see changes in how the drug laws are applied. Drug courts alone are not going to be able to save us from the problems we're going to have to deal with. And the biggest problem is going to be like everything else that's come out of Columbus, okay? When they took away local government funding, okay, they bootstrapped all the counties and everybody else, and they give you unfunded mandates. And there's only so far you can go in dealing with these unfunded mandates to try to make the law work effectively and to take care of the people that it's supposed to protect. And that's what's going to be coming down here in the next several months, if not the next year and a half or 2 years. They've been working on it for a long time. If you follow what goes on in Columbus and you follow what goes on in the newspapers or you watch any of the news stories on this, this is going to be a very difficult process. And it's going to require serious effort to be able to deal with it and continue to protect the citizens of Lorain County. Because of that, I ask for your vote in the primary on March 17th. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tomlinson, your closing statement.
Thank you. Yes. I've been practicing for 13 years. I've handled about every type of case you can imagine. The reason why I'm so interested in this position is because I do want to make a difference. I'm extremely interested in crime prevention. You know, during the course of my campaigning, I've been lucky enough to kind of touch base with every community. Those at risk, the more affluent neighborhoods, and everybody in between. I think what's super important is compassion. I think empathy is an extremely important quality in a county prosecutor. Now, I don't mean empathy as in weakness. I mean as in an understanding. Throughout the course of my 13 years of practicing, what I've really focused on is developing relationships. And you can see that with the wide array of endorsements I've received. It represents a very interesting cross-section of the county. I've got labor endorsements, police endorsements, fire endorsements. The first responder community seems to believe that I will keep you safe, and I do as well. And developing those relationships, I think the major kind of quality and skill set that I possess that may be different from my opponent is my ability to communicate with individuals and my ability to create situations where good ideas always win. And I'm particularly interested in the county prosecutor position because of the influence it has. Currently, I see it as kind of maybe it could be maximized. I think that I'd like to be out there in front. I'd like to lead from the front, and I want to be a part of the community. And because of that, I ask for your vote on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. Thank you very much for your time.
Let's give them both a round of applause, please. Thank you. Thank you both. This concludes our candidates forum for this year. We have a couple reminders for you that you should be aware that are coming up. So we'd like to thank both of the gentlemen for their insight, and we'd like to turn it back over to our president, President Juanita Senquis.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming here tonight. To all of our candidates, good luck to all of you. March 17th, again, don't forget to vote. Your voice is your vote. So remember to come out and vote on March 17th. As we conclude tonight, I would like to thank, of course, Joe Box from Lorain City Schools, Mr. Ring, our CEO of Lorain City School, Ray Bastock, our Executive Director of Lorain High School, and the operations staff. Timekeeper Pablo, and I had to help him out, sorry, because he's all by himself there. Our greeters, I believe it was Wanda and Rebecca, I think they're gone already. And of course, to our moderators, Alicia Pardon, Lexi Thompson, and Mike Fidelis. Thank you all. Thank you. Good night.
This has been a production of Lorain City Schools TV 20 WLCS.